Secular objective morality. Morality is the principles or criteria used to judge what is right or wrong, and how to answer the questions: an action is right if, or an action is wrong if. There are many different ways and approaches to answering these questions. For example, realism versus anti-realism. Moral realism is the position that there are true moral statements that report objective moral facts about reality, whereas moral anti-realism is the position that there is no objective moral facts about reality. For example, some versions of anti-realism would include error theory, where all moral sentences are false, or ethical subjectivism, where moral sentences are claims about subjective attitudes rather than objective facts, or non-cognitivism, where moral sentences are not propositions at all and therefore cannot be true or false. There's also absolutism versus relativism. Moral absolutism is the position that there is at least one moral statement that is true in all cases, whereas moral relativism is that moral statements can be true or false, but only in some relative contexts. There's also consequentialism, deontology, and virtue ethics, where consequentialism says an action is moral based on the consequences it has, and deontology says certain actions are themselves moral or immoral regardless of context, and virtue ethics, which says actions are moral if the character of the person enacting them is virtuous. There's also pragmatic versus utopian approaches to morality. Pragmatic moral systems are designed around what is possible in our current society, whereas utopian moral systems are designed around what would be moral in an ideal society. There's also questions of free will, volition, and intentionality. For something to be moral, does it need to be voluntary or knowingly chosen? What if someone has a brain tumor and does some action that is immoral and that caused them to do it? Would that be considered immoral? And what if someone doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, such as children? And can animals be moral agents or victims of immoral actions? There are many problems and dilemmas in addressing the ethics, such as the fact, value, and is-ought distinction, the Euthyphro dilemma, the trolley problem, the tunnel problem, the violinist thought experiment, and can morality be objective, and if so, what would make it so? One of my favorite approaches is that of John Rawls' veil of ignorance, who said that to design a just society, you must design it behind a veil of ignorance where you do not know where in the society you will be placed. The different combinations of ways in which people address these various approaches and problems have resulted in numerous models of morality, such as all of these, and all of these, and here are some more. So when asking what is objective morality, there are two separate questions here. What is objective morality, as in what is it made of, its ontology? And what are the laws or principles describing the effect objective morality has, like what it does? For example, you can think of laws of nature like gravity. They're not existing things, they are descriptions of what something in nature does, not what it is. Gravity is the bending of space-time. What it does is cause things to fall at some specific rate. In the case of morality, the same question can be asked, whereas morality can have an is question of what it ontologically is, and then a does question of what it methodologically, the effect that it has. I am only attempting to answer the latter and provide a description of what the principles outlined in objective morality does, not what it actually is. What objective morality could be, to answer the is question, could be the nature of a god or some undiscovered particle or wave in nature or an abstract Platonic form, but that question is irrelevant to the one I'm answering. If you want my personal opinion, I think the best answer to the what is morality question would just be an undiscovered super law of nature grounded in pantheism rather than theism. So let's assume there is some objective morality and that our moral intuitions give us some knowledge of what this objective morality is. Now, clearly, many of our moral intuitions contradict one another. Therefore, we need some criteria to filter out the subjective intuitions, leaving only those that indicate the objective truth. So, for example, we should look for some commonalities in all the different versions of morality. So, most moral systems seem to agree that helping others, even if it isn't moral, is preferable to harming others, though they have vastly different definitions of what constitutes help. So most things we consider moral entail helping others, like protecting someone, saving someone, feeding the hungry, providing homes to the homeless. Also, it seems to be less moral if you provide this help to someone who doesn't need it as much, like giving food to a friend who forgot their wallet would be less moral than giving food to someone who is homeless. It also seems that the greater the amount you help, the more moral you are. The more you give, the more people you help, the more moral you are. Also, morality seems to depend on how much you give compared to how much you are capable of giving. A poor person giving all they have, even if it's only a meager amount, is more moral than a rich person who gives a significant amount, which is only a small fraction of what they have. Morality is also dependent on how much you help actually, or how much your help actually helps. Giving 1 penny each to 2 billion starving people would not be as moral as giving 10,000 starving people $2,000 each. So how useful the help is also affects its morality. Of course, in general, it would be moral to help someone. It would not be moral to help someone at the expense of others, like stealing food from one to feed another. That would be immoral. So broadly speaking, it seems that humans view morality as the providing of assistance to someone lacking some necessary or beneficial thing they cannot or have not acquired. So it seems the pinnacle of morality would be the best possible person, who would be someone who wants to help as many people as possible to the greatest extent possible without harming others while expecting nothing in return. Now, just defining morality as help does not seem to qualify as an objective morality, because that doesn't tell us what kind of help we should be providing. What should we be helping others to do or to attain, and what exactly are the necessary and beneficial things that we should be helping people to get? Answering that question seems to be the most controversial part of any moral system and the biggest hurdle to defining objective morality. I take a utopian approach. I believe that if we can know what actions would be moral or immoral in the best of all possible worlds, then we can know those actions are objectively moral or immoral in all possible worlds, thereby giving us a grounds for objective moral laws. To know what actions would be best, we need to know what the necessary and beneficial things are. I believe the greatest moral good is the freedom to answer this question for yourself. Every person should get to decide what the necessary and beneficial things are to their life, and we should help them to achieve those things. I believe forcing someone to live by someone else's standard of what is good would be immoral, kind of like slavery. You'd be forcing your values onto someone else, and I consider that immoral. My justification for this is, if it is moral to help, would it be more moral to help someone get what I say is necessary or beneficial, or would it be more moral to help a person get what they say is necessary or beneficial? In general, it seems more moral to help someone get what they themselves have defined as necessary or beneficial, rather than getting them something someone else has defined as necessary or beneficial. Of course, you can bring up the objection about what about children who want cake instead of veggies, but I'll address the criticisms in a little bit. Now, if someone is being forced to abide by someone else's set of values, such as slavery, it would then be moral to free them so they can pursue their own values. Again, you could bring up another criticism about what about people in prison? Would it be moral to free them? To address these criticisms, in any world that is not the best possible world, some immoral actions may be necessary to prevent other more immoral actions from happening, in which case the former would be justified immoral actions. It is objectively immoral in the best possible world, but it would be subjectively justified in some worlds that are not the best of all possible worlds. If we lived in the best of all possible worlds, there would be no consequence of children eating as much cake as they like, and criminals could not harm others without consent. Therefore, there is no justification for stopping children from eating cake or putting criminals in prison against their will, making such actions simply immoral in the best of all possible worlds. The most contentious part of my position is that I see nature itself as immoral. Remember that if someone is being forced to abide by someone else's values, such as slavery, it would be moral to free them so they can pursue their own values. Nature applies more of these involuntary restrictions than anything else. We are all slaves to nature, as it forces us to have many values we had no say in, such as food and air and warmth and youth and health, etc. I did not choose for my body to get weak and die when I get old. This is something that is being imposed on me against my will. Meaning, nature is horribly immoral, and it would be moral if we could free humanity from the values imposed on us by nature, such as age and hunger and suffering and death, making them voluntary. Most people consider morality to only apply to actions done by agents requiring some kind of intentionality or volition. Nature doesn't have any such intentionality, so how can it be considered moral or immoral? Now, I consider this to be wrong. I think nature can be immoral, and to consider nature itself immoral would be a strange inversion of reasoning, to use Dan Dennett's phrase, but I'm going to bite the bullet here and just say our intuitions are wrong and nature is in fact immoral. It seems strange that we see the act of assisting someone to gain necessary or beneficial things to be what qualifies as moral, rather than the obtainment of the things themselves. The reason for this could be due to evolution. If our moral intuitions were guided towards the acquisition of the thing, this may make people feel it is moral to harm you to get what they want, resulting in a zero or negative sum game to the detriment of society. Whereas if if helping others is intuitively moral, it will result in a positive sum game where the haves will help the have-nots, resulting in more people who can work to the benefit of society, making a cooperative society better off than a selfish society in the long run. Also, it seems there would be little evolutionary benefit to holding grudges or getting revenge against rocks for falling on people, so it would be unlikely evolution would produce such inclinations. Because evolution selects for survival rather than truth, any intuition that is purely evolutionarily inspired would not necessarily describe objective morality. This is why I believe we should dismiss the intuition that morality requires agency. Therefore, it seems our intuition that morality requires agency is purely a product of evolution and would therefore not be a feature of objective morality if there is such a thing. In order to gain a better understanding of what morality really is, we need to relinquish our egocentric view that moral actions require agency. This is simply a biological disposition to benefit survival. True objective morality can be grounded in the reason this disposition is beneficial in the first place, the true core of immorality, the fact that there are necessary beneficial things we cannot acquire. The goal of objective morality would be ending the immoral state of affairs that there are necessary or beneficial things that we cannot acquire. Each individual should have the right to define for themselves what these necessary and beneficial things are. We can use this principle to judge the immorality of nature. Like one possible example of a beneficial thing would be not having rocks fall on you. Imagine two worlds, one where rocks occasionally fall on people and hurt them, and another where rocks cannot fall on people and hurt them. All else being equal, the world in which rocks cannot hurt people is more moral because it has less involuntary restrictions of will. By comparing worlds and assessing which have the least involuntary restrictions of will, we can judge worlds to be more or less moral than others. We can repeat this question for any given phenomenon a world may have and compare all possible worlds. Using this as a methodology, we can discover the most moral of all possible worlds, the best of all possible worlds. The best of all possible worlds would be a world that has no involuntary restriction of will. For example, if you had complete control over your own universe and could do anything you wanted. Of course, if two people live in this universe, they may have contradictory wills, so we have to go one step further to the best of all possible worlds for all possible wills. The best of all possible worlds for all possible wills would be a world where all wills have sovereignty over themselves and total freedom to achieve their will so long as they do not impose upon the sovereignty of others. This can be simplified or shortened just to all wills have sovereignty over themselves. The other phrases just are redundant, they mean the same thing. In other words, every being gets their own universe which they can do whatever they want with. A common criticism of this idea I get is, well, it seems like a very lonely universe. How would wills interact with others? This isn't really a problem because, of course, we're still going to have interdimensional Facebook. So others can invite you to their universe, or you can invite others to yours, and you can choose to visit other universes if you voluntarily restrict your own will to accommodate the rules of that person's universe. Also, you can work with others to make universes controlled by democratic vote. You could choose to live in a universe exactly like the one we currently live in with all its positives and negatives. The possibilities are endless. Another question I'm often asked is, well, what makes this the best of all possible worlds? Well, it's the best because if there was anything better, a better possible universe or a better possible option, that would be one of the options you could choose from in this universe. My best possible world idea is strikingly similar to Robert Nozick's Utopia if it were taken to its logical extreme of us having power over the laws of physics to design our own universes rather than just our own societies. However, my model can adequately address many of the criticisms his model could not, as any restriction of will to freely move from world to world could only occur voluntarily. Here is a description of Robert Nozick's Utopia that I copied from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. You can feel free to read it if you so choose. As noted earlier, I believe that if we can know what actions would be moral or immoral in the best of all possible worlds, then we can know those actions are objectively moral or immoral in all possible worlds, thereby giving us a grounds for objective moral laws. Therefore, the objective moral standard can be defined as all wills should have sovereignty over themselves. Objective immorality would then be defined as any involuntary restriction of will, with the caveat that so long as you do not will to impose on the sovereignty of others. Of course, we don't actually live in the best possible world, so how can this model of objective morality be used to know what is moral or immoral in our subjective world? Now, we live somewhere in between the best of all possible worlds and the worst of all possible worlds, somewhere along a spectrum. And if you accept this model of morality, our moral imperative is to move closer to the best of all possible world by freeing people from the involuntary restrictions imposed by nature and others to the best of our pragmatic ability. As noted earlier, some immoral actions like giving children everything they want and putting criminals in jail are justified immoral actions as they prevent greater immoral actions from occurring in our subjective world, which isn't the best of all possible worlds. As we advance technologically, we can mediate the consequences of those greater immoral actions, making the justified immoral actions no longer justified and just plain immoral. For example, if we develop the technological means to produce enough food to survive without the need of eating meat, it would then no longer be justified to kill animals to survive, and it would just be plain immoral to eat meat. Another example would be like stoplights and speed limits, which we may no longer need when we all have self-driving cars, making it immoral to force people to abide by stoplights as they no longer provide any benefit. One of the common arguments for an objective moral standard is that of moral progress, which is the idea that the longer we humans have lived, the more progress we have made as a culture to become more moral. I believe all of the moral progress humans have made follows this pattern, allowing for greater amounts of sovereignty over oneself when it becomes socially or technologically possible to do so. As we make advancements in technology, we can give more people more freedoms to do as they will by overcoming the immoral consequences of such actions imposed on us by nature. Other common examples would be like gay marriage. In conclusion, the objective standard of morality is the best of all possible worlds for all possible wills, where all wills have sovereignty over themselves, free from nature or others imposing involuntary restrictions on them. Our moral imperative is thus to progress closer to the best of all possible world by providing people as many freedoms as possible, limiting them only when necessary to prevent greater restriction of will in our pragmatic world. In order for a system of morality to truly qualify as objective, we need some criteria to differentiate it from all of the others. And I believe the best way to demonstrate a model of morality qualifies as objective is its ability to solve the biggest philosophical problems in the field of ethics, such as the fact-value is-ought distinction, the trolley problem, and the others. These act like an empirical test to verify moral truths, in my opinion. My model solves the fact-value distinction by arguing nature is itself immoral, therefore morality is not about human values or what we ought to do, it's about facts about the way nature is. This leads to the serendipitous conclusion that science is the most moral of all human enterprises because it does more to free us from nature's involuntarily imposed values than anything else, moving us closer to the best possible world. This idea of the best of all possible worlds presents a problem for theism from my perspective, because if there was an all-good, all-powerful God, it would have created the best of all possible worlds. We clearly do not live in the best of all possible worlds, therefore there must not be an all-good, all-powerful God. A common objection to this idea is that God may have sufficient reason for allowing involuntary suffering. However, any potential benefits of a God-designed world that may justify him allowing involuntary suffering are possible in the best possible world, as anyone may choose to live in a world exactly like our immoral world as designed by God. The only difference being those that do not wish to be a part of such an immoral world can choose to live in one of their own preference. In addition, giving beings the option to choose for themselves whether or not they want this benefit would be morally superior to simply forcing it upon them against their will. In fact, doing so would be immoral. Therefore, there is no possible justification for a God not creating such a world as the best of all possible worlds, and forcing beings to live in a world not of their choosing is simply immoral. I believe most people would agree such a world would be morally superior to ours. Therefore, if our moral intuitions are correct, there is no all-good, all-powerful God. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about my idea of the best of all possible worlds. I'd love to hear any feedback so that I can improve on my ideas. If you've got time, please take a few minutes to answer some of these questions in the comments so that I can get a better idea of your views of morality and so I can learn from them and try to improve my own. Thanks.